Hello, everyone. I'm very honored to give a talk on behalf of my team. The title of the talk is called Towards an Effective Negotiation Modeling, Investigating Transboundary Disputes with Cases of Lower Possibilities. And our paper is published on technological forecasting and social change. And this is a link there. With the quarters as follow. I'm going to break down my talk as follow, starting with motivation, research objective, then followed by modeling, analysis, and computational examples. Then we are going to discuss and then to sum up our paper in conclusion. So the contribution of work to peace engineering, because we know that peace is one of the fundamental factors that influence growth in economic activities, but also development of the political governance among other important aspects of living. So without peace, many areas of human existence are affected, because you know that now with the wars in Ukraine has caused a lot of chaotic situation, but also have affected many parts of the world in terms of the shortage of food supply and higher costs, especially towards the petrol. And then in a way, it then get into cost of living crisis, but also peace is an essence of living, and the lack of it can be termed as opposition to life, and it will cause a lot of destructions and also miseries. When people cannot interact peacefully, there will be chaos and disarray. Therefore, peace is supreme in the world, and without it, nothing is achievable. In today's uncertain and rapidly changing world, analysis and forecasting on such uncertain and lower probability may have higher values. Our analysis contribute to peace engineering by showing the conditions of a group of consensus to coverage and the maximum number of rounds before such a convergence occurs, and the consensus assessment. Because in the process of achieving peace, negotiations are necessary. So there will be several rounds, and of course there will be convergence from different rationale that come to a convergence, to an agreement. And therefore, the proposed algorithm based on our research will be based on fuzzy Delphi and gray Delphi methods, because we can predict the probability and also the likely outcomes of the dispute cases with lower probability. The motivation is that the group decision-making models assumes that decisions are made after the group members have exchanged information and realign their preferences. However, the process of how the exchange information changes individual preferences and thereby influences the final decision has the lack of details. Therefore, the process of how these final aggregation rules are formed is not entirely known. They motivate us to find out more and develop our own methods and algorithms. The paper focuses on the process by which a group that arrives at the joint assessment of the entity under consideration related to the negotiation aspect and transboundary dispute of peace engineering. So we want to apply how people negotiate and come to agreement, especially towards the transboundary dispute. Then research objective, we model a group as engaging in several rounds of discussion, and in order to attempt to arrive at a group assessment of an entity. All the individuals in a group update their evaluations based on the weighting and the input from each group member. I'm going to explain what weighting means a little bit later, and that is based on one of the greatest scientists in this field called Pauli in 1983 and 1986. So we then study his model and then make further improvement to apply theory into practices. And for the process model, this paper shows a condition that in which the consensus group assessment can arrive. It also provides a formula to calculate the number of rounds of discussion necessary for the convergence of assessment. So we then need to identify how many rounds are required in normal circumstances, so that we then can compute for the better probability, and also we then can make a better preparation for the next round or next few rounds if necessary. Further, it shows the condition under which the consensus, if one is arrived at, will be on par with, higher than, or lower than the average of the initial individual assessment. So it then allows us to know whether our forecasted outcomes should be adjusted according to what the reality is, so that every time we then double check with the the results with reality checks. So the modeling one, traditional Delphi method. So the Delphi method started from 1963, consists of several rounds of written questionnaires that allow experts to give their opinions. After the experts answer each round of questionnaires, the facilitator collects all the answers and then hands out a summary report of the answer to each expert. Then the expert fill out another questionnaire to provide updated opinions based on what they understand from the summary report. The Delphi method becomes complete when the consensus of forecast is achieved. Means that, of course, everybody is different. Then there is a facilitator to collect everyone's opinion and then try to come to consensus in the process. So in the process, it may even end up the third round of questionnaire if necessary. However, the disadvantages means that low convergence expert opinions, high execution costs, the possibility of filtering out particular expert's opinion, and the requirements of anonymity, which could be violated to real-world practices. Because by doing so, it's very unlikely. We then don't know who the person will be, but also we may exclude very minority opinion, which may come out to be very important decision, especially for the financial crisis that they were already experts. However, a very small number of experts warning a potential financial crisis between the year 2002 and year 2004. So we then have to be aware that every method may have its weaknesses. And then the fuzzy Delphi method and gray Delphi method. So Murray and so on in 1985 proposed a fuzzy Delphi method to integrate the traditional Delphi method and a fuzzy theory to improve the vagueness of the Delphi method. The use of the fuzzy numbers permits the appropriate representation of the subjective preferences in decision-making, and the fuzzy logic is still applied in recent studies. The gray Delphi method, that's in 2011, is the integration of the gray system theory and Delphi method, which uses gray whitening weight function based on Delphi questionnaire to select evaluation indicators. Thus, it can then improve or relax the conditions required on the Delphi method by allowing their weights to other individuals to be adaptive for Delphi method. So in the process, there are different scientists that try to improve on the traditional Delphi method. So one is called fuzzy Delphi, the other one is called gray Delphi. However, each method may have its own weaknesses. And then what's next is that we propose an integrated Delphi method that adopts both the fuzzy Delphi method and gray Delphi method, so that we then take all the strong points together and then form another method. This is one of the major contributions, and you can improve on the traditional Delphi method. So the improvement include that the computational powers offered by the combined methods can improve the performance. It means that we not only use mathematical calculation, but the computational power can allow us to simulate more, and the most up-to-date data and information can be used as the input, thus allowing more accurate analysis and predictions on uncertainties, so that we can have a better understanding on uncertainties. And the integrated model can deal with uncertain, incomplete, and hazy data that allows us, in our method, we are able to study negotiating issues with a quite lower probability of success. So it allows us to identify more uncertain, incomplete data, and also look at the chances they may have a lower probability of success, and then find ways to adapt it. And then just to get into more into theories, there are a few things you need to know. That N individuals are involved in a group discussion, M group assessment. So the assessment outcome here would be the group's estimate of the probability of the event taking place. Each individual's estimate is conveyed to all of the group members after each round. Each individual is asked to provide a fresh probability estimate upon receipt of other group members' estimate from the previous round. So then we can then perform the trial. That each individual I is assumed to attach different weights to the estimate of each member of the group. So the individual I's estimate is assumed to be updated by updated in a Bayesian manner as per Borley. So then we then follow the rules, but also we also double check with Bayesian and also Borley methods, and analysis examine the convergence of both the limiting or the converged rules, and the convergence rates of this dynamic process. So convergence means that it comes from different grounds. We have totally different grounds, but then we are willing to talk and come to a conclusion. So this is called convergence, or the probability in which that we will come to convergence or some kind of agreement. And now let's get into formulas. I hope because there are a lot of details in the paper, you will be able to read it. So here I will still try my best to explain. So then we look at a few things. So pi power r bracket e is a probability assessment of alternative or events by individual I for run r. So this is a probability that we're looking at. And then because that convergence model runs with a logarithmic log functions, therefore we then get into the log function. Then the weight is the weight matrix whose elements at I, the row and the j column is wij. So in the way, the weight matrix can allow us to know how many rows and how many columns in this. And then LR, there is a column vector, and R row and LO be the initial assessment column vector. So in this way, we then know there is a weight, the matrix whose elements with I and J, and then with the LR, because this is a column vector, we need to know, and it has to be greater or equal to 0 in this. And then we then do the summing up of it. And then I'm going to explain in the next slide. So these are the mathematical formulas. So you then can get into it. So L power 1 equal to WL power 0. So similarly, if we do some mathematical expansion, it will then L power 2, it will get into it, and then you will then divide into W times WL power 0, then W2 L power 0. So then you can then, in general, you then can conclude that the L power R equal to the W power R times L power 0. So the Wij power R is the elements of I row and a J column to a matrix WR, and W is the stochastic matrix. So we can use it, however, it has the conditions. First of all, the weightage has to be 0 and more and all the I and J has to be more than one column, and then the weightage will be continuously going on forwards, and it will equal to 1. It's the maximum value can go for the number of times. So it means that the probability will get to 1, of course. It means that you have more than one rounds, of course. So state J is said to be accessible by state I if there exists a positive integer Rij such that the weightage is greater than 0. So it has to be greater than 0. Otherwise, there's no point for the negotiation. You are going for success to some point, or even though the probability can be low, all states communicate with one another if there exists n power 2 positive integers Rij. So you will have to be at least one proper round, and then such that the weightage is greater than 0, and then of course all of these I and J and I have to be greater than 1, and J equal to n. N means the number of the negotiation that will be required in this case, and then the largest common divisions is the IRR and also DJ called the period of the state I. The state I is periodic, so then the I has to be equal to 1. So there are theorems. I hope you may not get bored for this, but I will explain in a way that you can understand. But for further information, you can read our paper. That we also have some additional information on this in our appendices. So then you always go into lots of simulation or lots of rounds going to infinity. And then if you formulate this, so with the terms of L1 power R, then you can then expand it further, and then you will do it many times. You will come to a conclusion that you've got a limit of Ln power R, and you are running that for infinity. And then we can define the alpha bracket W. So then we can equal to the minimum, because if that in the best scenario, you don't have to go many rounds of negotiation, and in a minimum time or minimum rounds will achieve agreement. That will be the best scenario. And also R or 0 greater or equal to 1, such as the alpha times the W power RO is greater than 0, because your effort has and probability of winning has to be greater than 0. So the theorem to the condition 3 and 6 hold, and the maximum number of rounds R squared required for the proposition, and the proposition looks like this, will be less than or equal to the given positive number and epsilon, and it's also smallest integer R satisfying the following inequality. So of course there will be formulas, and then the first proposition is that the weightage is equal to 1 if it comes to success. Success means 1, and not success means 0. You can also interpret that way, and I can then show you a simulation later, and then you can then formulate this. So R equal to infinity. You can, of course, in theory, you can run it many times. And then the proposition 2, the L R squared, in the way that when you run many times, it will become to L power star. So and that means that R can get to infinity for all of the I. And similarly, the proposition 3, if you goes on that, the weightage W is equal to this formula, and it's not all of the Lj power 0 are identical. Therefore, then you can then also make it a generic way. It then comes to L power star, and in a way you can get to 0. But however, you will then run many times. In the case that when you are not able to meet the condition, you may have a lower probability or even on the way down. So by having all these theories, sometimes it's very important for us to focus on computational example, and that's where our contribution is, because based on the great scientist, that was what he has done in 1963. So different rounds of negotiation will eventually come to convergence, at least 5 rounds or even more. So that, and then you run everything up to 20 rounds or so, you will come to a convergence. But however, the best scenario is that if in this base case, and the first 5 rounds are very important because you will set the scenes whether you are successful or not. And most of the major updates and major information, you will know each other a lot within the first 5 rounds, and even you'll come to a conclusion in the first few rounds is possible. So there are also other people who try to agree the major things the first 5 rounds, and then subsequently the small number of things are being discussed and agreed in the next few rounds. So you can also apply this number. So by having the integer between I equal 1 to 4 and with a j from 1 to 4 from the weightage formula, then we can get all these values. So then we can then put it back to Lj power 0. So then we can get this value, and then we can subsequently put them back into the formula. So this is what happened in the computational way. So our role is to run them many times. However, based on the scientist's theory, we try not to invent something new. First of all, we try to study whether the result could be replicated, and if so, what are the additional conditions we need to know. And secondly, if we can replicate the result, and how can we make improvements? So then we based on fuzzy Delphi and gray Delphi method. So in a way that we will be able to filter out the useful information, and then we can improve on the model, we can improve the mathematical model, and then run the simulation smoothly. So we will notice that the first 5 round, this is the condition where there are 2 sides. Whether on one end or the other, starting from 1 or 0, you will come to an agreement. And then you will then see whether in the first 5 rounds, will there be any agreement be reached. So you will find that at the very beginning, there's a huge difference. For one, you want to drop all the way down because your expectation will be like that. And then you will have to agree to a certain extent if both sides have the willingness to work together. So this research has also a very important precondition. We will try to find consensus and then let each other to work, agree and on the agenda or something. And when they agree to work together, then we find a solution and reach the consensus somewhere in between. So this is the probability in which they will come to consensus. So then we will then see there's a high, medium, and low. For the high, the average of the probability is around 0.45. It really doesn't matter, in the case that you run it many times. It can be 1,000 times or even more than 1,000 times, and it can be even ended up more. But then more or less, you are going to get this. So the first time or first 5 times of running, you tend to get a result. Sometimes you can get some fluctuation in between because there can be a lot of expectation outside your initial thoughts. But then after a few rounds, of hard negotiation, you're agreeing to each other. And similarly, medium term, there's around 0.3 to 0.35. And also on the lower probability, it's just right above 0.2. And then similarly, if you run it 1,000 times, you will see that those fluctuations have been converged together. So you from a very high probability, then you will then come to us like this, and you may even reach out a very early consensus in the first few rounds, even the first 5 rounds. And if you and normally this means that the major things are being agreed in the first 5 rounds, and then if they are willing to work together, the remaining are just on the very minor details. And this is the result of running 1,000 times of simulation. So what we get from here is that the implication first, suppose two sides have similar points of views on key agenda. In this case, there is a higher probability to work together, and that stands for the one with higher probability. And this is a likely one to persist in combining to a decision and not abandon in either temporary or permanently. They are also likely to work and stay together for long term. So it means that if there's a job offer being made, it's just that the salary is not what the job seeker needs. But then you normally will accept a job, and then you will begin the negotiation or how much you are going to get. And if the range can be slightly higher, you usually reach a deal. Probably even not in round 5, maybe you reach that deal in round 2 or 3. So second, if two sides they have differences at the beginning, but eventually merge and can work together, like the black lines, they should also find things in common and work together in the medium term. When the simulation goes on and more rounds with the probability of having stricter criteria imposed on each other, the alliance will have the tendency to get apart. So it means that although they may get together and agree on a thing, however, there are a lot of differences in them. They have not get settled down. So if you have not get settled down soon, the problem will escalate, and there will be using another model to then understand the impact. Because although you agree, sorry, I do not mean any discrimination or anything, but I would rather use the everyday example. So if a particular state or country is seeking independence, and because they are not happy with the current government is doing, and there's a likelihood this state or this country may get independence. Okay, and the example might be Scotland. Although you're part of UK, and the government really have to fix a lot of problems as early as possible. So the third point is that two sides have huge differences initially and even agree at or before the 5th round on convergence. In this case, it will be difficult to maintain a long-term relationship, as we found after running a large-scale simulation. Of course, although they may agree on something, but they do not agree with the way that the other side is doing, or they do not agree, with the way that. So this is usually happening in transboundary dispute, but also between a country. They have conflicts, such as what's happening in the Middle East. Maybe they have a peace treaty, but then there could be some other small conflict that happen. And fifth, given the initial starting conditions, a mechanism can be used to calculate the expected convergence value and the number of rounds to convergence for group decision context. So the main contribution of our paper was the development of a model of multiple round group decision making. Our model allows calculation of outcome based on the starting condition and expected probability of success and predicted outcomes for each negotiation round. So it can be used in key negotiation if we need to know what's the likelihood we may get to the agreement, what's the probability of success, and then if we change our condition, then what will be probability and how many rounds? And because we really need to understand all this, and our model will provide the theoretical understanding to combining the pivot point in Rao and Steckel 1991, the group polarization model, if the constant is known. So that's in our endnote of the paper. Then the model allows to determine if risky shift at the group level will occur or not. Because what does it mean? Because people may change mind, and once you change your mind, then the whole thing may be changed. So we need to also know that. And our model can provide a formal representation, a mathematical model of the effects obtained by the Bohr on Monifan 1982 study. We can also go to mathematical validation. Cool. So we then use another example that has been explained in our paper. It is not our intention to have any discrimination of any country. We're just doing our research. So you may find that there are a lot of countries that may have certain very minor conflicts that happens in throughout centuries. And one of the examples is that some dispute between China and India, because I mean there's just very small conflict. However, what happened in 2020 was right after COVID, and then people are restricted for the movement, and then there were some transboundary disputes, and they are all very small detail. At the beginning, reached a consensus, but of course, after 5 rounds, things have changed because I mean the two sides have a different interpretation to the boundary, and then there was also some actions caused by the sentiment analysis of the citizen. So I think people became very high in the sentiment, and then there were certain things were not so happy, but then we were some turbulent because each side tend to. Usually, this is humans. We tend to think problems are from the outside, but sometimes it can be also the way that partly from us, from ourselves. But then it comes to certain agreement that has been settled. But this is just an example, and we try to simulate what a situation is, and we have to know there was a result 2 years ago, and this kind of thing is dynamic. Every time can be different. In fact, every week or every month you can get different outcomes, and that can be applied to not just between countries, but between companies or between two people, even the relationship between you and your wife or husband, or even about getting a job offer, like whether people give you an offer and whether you accept it or not based on the condition, and you can also apply that to important tasks that you need to convince the other party about providing more funds to your company or project. So the conclusion is that we have developed a model that provides a link between an individual assessment is updated as broadly 1983 and the assessment arrived at a group that's Rao and Steckel 1991. We combine both approaches, and also we capture the effects seen in several major articles that has a theoretical mechanism for understanding or pivot point. So in a way that we then make a balanced approach, we cannot stop conflicts, but the purpose, but also we propose way to reach agreement and to investigate peace engineering quantitatively and scientifically, because we need to demonstrate that those results can be done through computational methods, so that it then can make those mathematical validation much easier. But also we need to all understand the probability is a dynamic number. It can change very quickly. Therefore, you cannot just based on the all result and to understand and interpret what's happening now. And nowadays, because everything becomes so fast, we will have to be able to understand them as early and as fast as possible. So we blend the Farsi Delphi and Gray Delphi methods together to make a further improvement to the traditional Delphi model and additional contribution. So our model should be applied in various areas, such as transboundary disputes and international relations. And we can also use in marketing settings, such as decision making in organizational buying centers. You want to decide to buy certain things, and you want to have a negotiation with a supplier and your clients, and also negotiation involving multiple parties. And we will be able to develop our models in terms of negotiation, and so that we need to then find out the success rate, and then we then can adapt different strategies in order to increase our success rate. So if we have the further funding or further time to explore this, of course, we can make our model much more established. So why should you use our paper? So first of all, our method is successful to be applied to negotiating issues with a quite lower probability of success. Therefore, the transboundary dispute between China and India is just an example, and with the expert's opinion expressed sufficiently without distortion, and the results that can be more objective. The method can be used to predict the likely outcomes with or without the crucial additional variable such as COVID-19, because COVID-19 can make a lot of things being a little bit turbulent and unpredictable. That's why a lot of problems outside are not just a healthcare problem, but also like supply chain problems, the cost of living crisis problem, and so on. And on top of this, our method will be able to allow us to predict the likely outcomes beyond 5 rounds, limiting the original Delphi method. And we can then see the outcomes may vary with respect to time, and we will be able to understand the change of time, and then what sort of probability, what sort of likely chances we are going to get. so they can revise our strategy accordingly. And then it's also crucial to find resolution and agreement to reduce the impact of conflicts, because among all these of the agenda of urgent priority in the world, we have to provide one type of recommendation and then investigate further, because that that these days there are more wars and more conflicts rather than more peaceful agreements and so on. So if you can just go to the link, scientific Science Direct paper is there. However, we didn't get funding at the time, and we have another alternative version, if that's all right for you. Thank you so much for your time to listen, and we wish you all the best. And I hope that if our paper is relevant and helpful or inspiring to you, please cite it. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best. Have a good time. Bye.